Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Steve Gutzler, who's the president of Leadership Quest, a premier leadership development keynote speaker, author, and authority on emotional intelligence, personal leadership, team building, sales mastery, customer service, and change. His client list includes more than 2,000 top companies, including Microsoft, Starbucks, and Cisco. He's authored several books, including his most recent, Splash, 10 Remarkable Traits in Life and Leadership. He's appeared on more than 70 television and radio interviews, we'll have to say more than that than now, and recorded so many things regarding how to improve leadership. So I'm really excited to have you here, Steve. Welcome.
Thank you, Diane. I'm thrilled. I'm very excited to be with you. Thank you.
Well, we have a lot of the same background in terms of our interests, because I wrote my doctoral dissertation on emotional intelligence, and I was in sales for decades, and all the things you talk about is everything I'm interested in. So I'm very fascinated.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I was watching some of your talks and different things that you do, and I don't know where I want to start. I think I was fascinated by you talking about how often we are at our full potential and how we self-regulate to determine our leadership ability. Full potential, how do you even know what that is? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So a lot of what I do, Diane, whether it be on a one-on-one coaching or when I work with teams, we talk a lot about the 17% moments. And what I'd like to explain is there's been several studies. Harvard has one that's very powerful that talks about personal leaders in different sectors, whether they be medicine or business, sales, law, individual personal leaders who operate at fairly high rates, about 83% of the time. In fact, they're high functioning, they handle tasks, they handle relationships. But unfortunately, the 83 isn't the big number. The big number is 17. 17% is when we get emotionally hijacked, when we're under stress, we're faced with a challenging relationship with a team member or a colleague. And what I'd like to tell leaders and teach leaders is it's not the 83 that will determine your true leadership and reputation. It's how you handle the 17% moments. So I like to give leaders a lot of personal tactics and strategies of how to self-regulate and make sure they can kind of keep maintaining those optimum levels and not get sabotaged, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's so stressful to be in leadership positions. I often have had people on the show who say, that leaders are hard on themselves. They think they should know more than they know, and they feel like they're kind of, putting up this face of something that people think that they're something that they're not. But I think a lot of people have that sense that maybe that they should be something better. But if you're self-aware, that's a big part of emotional intelligence. And I noticed you said highest performing leaders are self-aware. How do we become self-aware and realistic and know realize that we can't know everything, right?
Yeah, I think of self-awareness really in two areas. One, I'm sure you would relate to this, Diane. I think as you progress in your career, you begin to recognize your strengths and also your weaknesses, areas that you're not gifted in. And I think your self-aware leaders first begin there. They recognize to be effective, they need to leverage kind of their strength zone and magnify that. They also will staff around or bring in support around their weaknesses. So that's a big part of self-awareness. But the other part that I like to remind leaders, I was just prior to the show, we were talking, I was dealing with a lot of probation officers down in Arizona, in Tucson and Phoenix.
That's right.
And I have a son in law enforcement, and I do quite a bit of work in and around that space. And the other thing I like to teach personal leaders in regards to self-awareness is that your mood, your attitude, and your emotional exchange is as important as any informational exchange you give. So I think your high performing leaders, whether they be in, a medical profession, they're in sales, and I would even challenge all of your listeners to think about what's the primary emotional exchange they provide on a daily basis to the relationships, whether they be personal or professional, because people will come away from you feeling a little bit better about themselves and the situation, or they'll feel a bit depleted just by being in your presence or even in that email exchange.
Oh, definitely.
So getting back to self-awareness, your high performing leaders recognize their emotional impact matters. They can really move the needle. They have the power of what's called the power of persuasion and influence on every single encounter in the course of a day. So that to me is the biggest. It's almost like a dimmer switch. The more you turn that up and recognize your emotional exchange, your mood and your attitudes, and how that affects others, the more powerful you are in leveraging it in a positive way.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think, there's some leaders are not at the very, very top. They're mid-level, executives, or they have people they have to report to above them and below them. And some people have been known to kiss up and kick down. And would you consider that a self-sabotaging behavior? I mean, what is the thought process behind that, you think?
As far as what again, Diane?
Well, if they're kissing up, to people
Okay.
above them, but kicking
Yep.
down and treating people below them differently.
Yeah, that's a interesting expression. I've not heard of it
Yeah.
coined in that way, but
Uh-huh.
I get it visually.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think that's just an expression of insecurity, a lack of self-concept and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Your most powerful personal leaders. And when I talk about leaders, let's make a distinguishing part. There are positional leaders, and we need them. We need
Mm-hmm.
these senior C-level leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the strongest leaders often are right in the middle of an organization.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I always tell leaders, you're going to lead really in four directions. You will lead down to anyone on your team. You're going to lead side to side to clients and customers and colleagues. And you'll lead up.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to lead up, of course, is to provide value and solution finding and being optimistic and being supportive of the leaders over you. And I don't know a leader, when I say that, a high leader, that wouldn't be very attracted to someone that just continues to provide value.
Right.
So if someone's kissing up or kicking down, they're just sabotaging their influence. And we need authentic leaders. We need confident leaders. We need leaders who know who they are and that they can move throughout the course of their day with a sense of personal confidence. I think that's really one of the top attributes of leadership.
Right, I agree with you completely, and you have said that mood, attitude, and emotion are contagious, and you talked about staying motivated in one of your talks I was watching, and you mentioned 3 buckets. What are the 3 buckets? I don't know if I caught what they were.
Yeah, it's such a fun part. When I did this keynote at the Outlook Leadership Conference, we're talking off air, and it was in Scottsdale, and these were high-level executive leaders. And one of my key points is, if you're going to be a great leader, you need to be smart. You need to really build smart teams that have a strategic vision, hire the best people you can, have great technology, finances, create clarity, be smart, but be smart and healthy. And one of the things I'm seeing, Diane, is a lot of leaders that are smart and are experiencing levels of success, but when you look at their life, and it's not a point of judgment, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not healthy.
Right.
And so I encourage them to fill the 4 buckets. Number 1, you have a physical bucket, and you've got to get very strategic about that. And I think it has to do with, we talk about working out, but I like the word train. You have to train like a corporate athlete. You have to begin to take your physical health serious and believe that your number 1 attribute is your energy, your physical, emotional energy. So be smart physically, take care of yourself, get on a good program. Number 2, there is the emotional bucket. And this is my favorite because we ignore it. Recreation, things offline things, not having to do with technology, things that bring you enjoyment. I call it recreational activities
Hmm.
that fill our emotional bucket. And then lastly, the spiritual bucket, which, may be defined differently for you, Diane, than for me, but I think that's an important bucket that keeps us centered, that keeps a heart of gratitude, that keeps us purpose driven. Um, so usually when I'm speaking, I bring one of those silver buckets like you serve champagne in,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm holding that up on stage and saying, don't forget to fill your buckets. So be smart and be healthy. And what that does, as you know, and I'm sure you would relate, there is a in the moment self-regulation of your emotions.
Hmm.
In the moment.
Right.
There's also a preventative side of emotional intelligence, and that is as you fill these buckets, you have greater reserves throughout the course of your day and week to respond. When I'm in a halted state, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, I'm going to put myself at risk.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially
Hmm.
tired for me.
Yeah, we get one.
Right.
I like to hold up my smartphone and say, "Gosh, we take better care of these than we do ourselves." It gets down to one bar, and I'm almost in a full panic. Get
Right,
my
right.
get my phone plugged in, and you
Well,
know,
that's so important. I think that it's something like 96% of executives feel burned out, right? Is it some high number like that?
yeah,
And so do you think that these three buckets are going to make you feel less burned out, obviously, right?
yeah. The Harvard Medical did a big, huge study on executives, and they said about 96 they weren't necessarily burned out, but they were fading. They had feelings of burnout. They were experiencing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 30 coaching clients, and I can tell you for a fact, the vast majority of the ones I deal with can border on that at any one time we meet, just because of the stress load, because of cortisol and the different
Right.
uh, issues that we face. So I think correct pacing, I think taking care of those buckets can definitely keep you from burnout. And burnout is not a badge of honor. It's an indicator of kind of being short-sighted, not having a long-term vision.
Well,
Yeah.
I definitely have met a lot of people who think that they're really productive but they're just busy. You know what I mean? They're just doing a lot of activities that don't really lead to anything. And
Hmm.
that's causing them to burn out. Can't you be more efficient? Wouldn't that give you more time and then have a chance to do these bucket items? How do you know that you're not planning the plan to plan the plan and never doing anything but planning? How do you how do you actually become more productive?
Well, on the production side, I think that's the game changer. I always tell leaders you have to get a absolute clarity of where you want to go in the next 12 to 24 months, and we talk a lot about that when I work one-on-one with people, because people have a pretty good idea, but when you really back them in the corner and say, no, I want more clarity, give me more clarity of where you want to go professionally, and let's not think small, let's take the limits off, let's allow yourself to stretch and create some visioneering. So once you get a vision of that, Diane, and your listeners, and say, I really want to accomplish this personally and professionally in the next 12 to 24 months. Then you have to set, as you know, some pretty strong dynamic goals around that. And I always suggest don't pick too many. We call the big five: three professional stretch goals, two personal goals. You don't need too many. Not that you're not doing other things, but let's
Mm-hmm.
come up with three. Say it's publish a book. Maybe it's increase your keynote speaking, or sales, or whatever it would be. Come up with some good stretch goals. Maybe get into optimum health for your age is one of them. Then we need to get some. I call it the three legs of the stool. Three legs, three goals that would support that. Three action goals that are going to support that. And then here's the big deal. What time do you like to get up, Diane?
Oh, you're not going to like this answer. 4 a.m.
Okay, well, I don't dislike that. I'm usually up at 5.
Yeah,
And you have some kind of a ritual, I
right.
suppose. What do you like to do in your first 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes? What are 2 or 3 things?
Well, I know what I'm not supposed to do, and I still do, is I look at my iPad at like, what did you say, 76% of people online before breakfast? I'm one of them. But I am a person that likes to get up and take a bath first thing. That's how I relax.
Hmm. Yeah, and so whatever that ritual is, I like to go down, I like to brew coffee, I like to get
Mm-hmm.
around. I do what's called, and I'm not suggesting everybody would do this, but
Mm-hmm.
for probably 5, 6 years, I've been doing a 20, 20, 20, which is 15, 20 minutes of a spiritual focus. It might end up being 5, it might be 10, but my goal is 15 to 20 minutes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the coffee's brewing, people will say, "Don't you ever look at your email right away?" I go, "Oh, yeah, as the coffee's brewing, I'll scroll through it."
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
But
on very
I
long.
don't jump into it
Yeah, I don't
because
either.
nine times out of 10, nothing's that urgent. But
Mm-hmm.
occasionally it's like, "Oh, wow, this is really important."
Right.
But so the coffee's brewing, then I get into spiritual. Then about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes of reading. And for me, that has been the biggest discipline because it fuels me. It kind of like builds the fire within me to give. My knowledge base, my motivation, my leadership. Okay. And then 15 to 20 minutes around focusing on what would be the 3 priorities of that day. Not the
Hmm.
5. I might have a things to do list of 10, but what would be 3 that I need to hit out of the park? And they have to be tied to one of the 3 big stretch goals that I set professionally.
Okay.
So, if that makes sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
the
It does.
first, so I always tell people if you can focus your first 60 to 90 minutes of your working day,
Mm-hmm.
say after your bath, you get around,
Okay. Yeah.
had something to eat, you get around and you've
Uh-huh.
done some thinking and you're like, now I'm going to work. If you did 60 to 90 minutes around high value activities that were based about what your goals were,
Mm-hmm.
my business coach talked to me 6 years ago and said, Steve, you could double your income in 14 to 16 months if you get focused on higher value work.
That's interesting.
So mine is always client referral,
Uh-huh.
referral follow-up. And I just came back from a conference and I had probably a half dozen great leads. What did I do the first 60 to 90 minutes this morning? I crafted emails for each of those individuals.
Right.
We're going to send them a copy of my book. And my goal is to convert probably half of that into some form of business partnership.
Right.
Now, what could have I done? Oh my gosh, there's scores of emails and different
Yeah.
things that would have given me instant gratification,
Uh-huh.
and so anyway, that's a big performance thing for me. I call it my sacred enclosure. The first 60 to 90 minutes has to be around high value.
Well, I have to do the things like that first thing in the morning because that's when my brain works the best for me. So I agree with you. I mean, if I save the really important things for later in the day when I'm toast, it's just not going to be as quality. And I think, a lot of people tend to do the things they like first. I tend to do the things that are hardest first. I mean, just
Well, good for you. That's probably the biggest discipline breakthrough for anyone. So it's probably why you've had the success you've had, and it doesn't make you better than people, but it took me probably close to be in my early 40s before I even talk about being self-aware, before I even really saw
that,
how I was
right.
ordering my day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to do the things they like first, you know what I mean, and put things off. And I like the thought of getting yourself in the right mindset. I mean, I couldn't do an ice bath like Tony Robbins or anything, but I think you got to find the things that work to get you motivated first thing in the morning. And some people just aren't morning people, though. They think better at night. Do you have the same advice for them?
Gosh, you just made such a great, important, and I always say, like when I talk about my 20, 20, 20, I say, look, this is an example. every one of us is custom designed. Each one of us has a different physical constitution, a mental constitution, a work rhythm. You need to figure out what is your best working rhythm. One good thing that all of your listeners could do is put together a list of what you would call your preferred best day. So if you are more of a late afternoon or evening person, maybe some of your high value work is there. A lot of creatives, I know a lot of people that are very, very creative, I mean, almost off the charts, tend to be late night people.
Definitely, yeah.
And I'm not. I'm a morning. I've got
Right.
most of my energy early in the day, and I kind of tail off as the day goes. But create your preferred best day and create a working rhythm schedule. I mean, literally from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, and put in where are your MVP moments, your most valuable, profitable work.
Well, I'm thinking about all this and how it ties back to the goals you were talking about. And, I don't know if you were in town for you. There was a Genius Network event I attended that Tony Robbins, why he came to mind, and a lot of big name people attended this thing. And I happened to go out to dinner with Naveen Jain because he had been on my show, and he's the guy that's got the first company that has permission to land on the moon. And we were talking about creating your moonshot. That was the theme of this event. Like, what is the big thing that you can do? And talk about stretch goals, right? Landing on the moon is his, but everybody was supposed to think of an idea of what would be their moonshot if they could for their industry. I mean, how do you know how much of a stretch to make your stretch goals?
I love that theme.
Yeah.
Gosh, you really got me thinking now. I would love for my clients to create what's called their moonshot. And because it's got to be that. It's got to be something. I say that vision is a picture of the future, which creates passion in the present.
Right.
So when you have that picture of the future of what you can become, it pulls you and it creates daily passion. I think a stretch goal has to be like a SMART goal. It's got to be specific, it's got to be measurable, but A is the big word. It's got to be attainable.
Right.
Okay? It's got to be relevant and time bound. So I've been guilty of setting these monster goals, and I get like 3 months or 4 months into my year, and I'm like depressed because it's like I haven't even gotten off the launch
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even on the launch pad. I don't even have the suit, the astronaut suit on yet.
Right.
And so I do take a lot of time, and I ask my clients to really give it some thought. And it's also got to be authentic. It's got to be something that kind of stirs and fires you up. And so again, not that you won't accomplish other things, but maybe there's 3 things. And I think this is the perfect timing because we're coming up on a new year. I don't, I'm not against New Year's resolutions, but I'd rather set a big 5. What are going to be my 3 professional stretch goals for 2018, and what are my 2 personal? And so I do give a lot of thought about it because I'll have, and sometimes I'll do a 3 and then I'll have a little star because there's a 4th one that's so close, and I think, you know what, I could probably do that 4th one too. It's not like you won't be focused on it,
Right.
but it's got to be something that fires you up. It's got to be something that pulls you into the future, Diane.
Well, I think that there's so many goals that people they forget part of the SMART. They leave out one of the letters, and they just don't. I know with my students, they're really bad at making them measurable. They just, I'm going to graduate. It's just very vague, and I think you got to really be specific. And I think, it was interesting to me. I'm curious about your book because you list the different, there's 5 parts of these goals and all that. What are the 10 remarkable traits in life and leadership that you write about in your book? Can you just list those 10 or a few of them? I mean, what do you think are some of the most important traits?
Yeah, I'll give you just a handful. I think number one, I kind of lead with it, is calling, kind of shifting your work to calling. And I call it, whether it be a calling or an assignment. I think the moment you begin to recognize that your work or your assignment can be a calling, it changes your mindset. And a lot of people are working. A lot of people, I get, I always smile when I don't know, different people have different catchphrases regarding Monday being negative, or Friday being such a highlight,
Right, right.
and and I get that, but
Yeah.
and not every day I'm just like over the top, but I just things changed for me when I recognized that I was called to do what I'm doing. And it's really powerful when you tie your life to your mission and your purpose. So I always tell leaders, take time to figure out what is going to be your center. I mean, your true core center. What is the character? What's your core for? And what's going to be your contribution, your unique contribution to being here? Because you are here for a purpose. So once a person gets purpose driven, and I think they can begin to bring more definition to their work and shift it to calling. Also, what I call the code of honor is another remarkable trait. When you create a list of, I say, 8 to 10 promises that you would like to make and keep for yourself. Okay, it's like a code. Like I work with the Seattle Seahawks. They're one of my great clients.
Wow.
And I work with the corporate side of their team, the chief operating officer and all their sales team. When you walk into the headquarters of the Seahawks, and they're going to be on tonight, by the way, our recording will be later, but I'm going to be watching the Seahawks tonight on Monday Night Football.
Awesome.
But when you walk into the headquarters, up on the wall is their code. They've got 5 promises they're going to make. Their commitment to excellence, their commitment to the 12th man, which is their fans, their commitment to team. It's all up there. And it may seem very basic, but they live by that code. Those are the promises. So the second big trait for me is getting leaders, getting people to come up with the promises they want to make and keep. You're only as strong as the promises you keep for yourself. So it might be, I want to create a family legacy. I want to be a corporate athlete and get into optimum health. I want to be a lifelong learner. I want to dream big and achieve. I want to live my faith. I want to learn, try, and grow. That's some of my code, and it becomes kind of that inner wiring, and the things that are very important to us when we get off track or feel kind of fuzzy with where our life is going. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely can. What I really can see is that this book, Splash 10 Remarkable Traits in Life and Leadership, everything you're talking about is going to help towards engagement at work too, and which is like the top thing that everybody's talking about. And whether you develop it as a leader to help people, who report to you, to become more engaged, or just to help yourself become more engaged. I mean, if we've only got a third of the workplace engaged, I could see how a lot of the stuff you're training probably helps immensely in that area. And I'm fascinated by everything you do, Steve. This has been just so great to talk to you about this. And I think a lot of people want to know how they can learn more about you. I mean, you have thousands of top clients. You mentioned, Seattle Seahawks, Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks, Kraft. I was looking at this list. It was just the who's who of who to have as your clients. So if people want to hire you or buy your book or find out more about you, how can they find out more?
Thank you, Diane. I love connecting with people. So probably the best way, of course, is my website, which is my name, Steve Gutzler. So it's Gutzler, stevegutzler.com. That's my website. And the book on Amazon is now an international bestseller in 6 countries, I believe. So we're excited about that. And they'll like it because it's not a big, thick book. It's an inspirational-based book. It's a shorter read, but something that I think when people read it, they'll go, wow, love the stories. I love the the coaching questions at the end of each chapter. I'm filling those in. So it's just kind of a real practical handbook, if you will, of inspiration. And then on the social media side, it's at Steve Gutzler. I think I've got close to 155,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm active. I do a weekly blog post and that sort of thing. So I'd love to connect with people. That's the cool thing about these virtual connections.
Well, that's awesome. And I could see you would do well on social media. I saw Huffington Post rated you as one of the number 1 excellence in social media. So awesome. But
thank you.
It was so fun having you on the show, Steve. Thank you again.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for everything you do.